first of all, let me welcome you again to the Future of Mobile Summit and welcome our panels, because we have, let me check, how are we doing? At least a good 40, 45 minutes to discuss one of the most important, I think, topics in the industry right now, so you know where you have to be. Well done on your priorities. I have here Anurag Lal, the CEO and President of Infinite Convergence, Julian Ranger, Chairman and Founder of DigiMe. We also have, if you are in MEF, you would recognize this man, Andrew Babb, the Chairman of MEF, but as well as here, the CEO and Founder of iProve, and Michael Becker from Assurant, a strategy advisor for Assurant. Now, each one of them has got a very interesting career. I won't give any time to pretty much say anything, but we will probably just mention a few things. The real questions we have in the next 40 minutes is to understand the future of privacy. And future of privacy is a big thing, because we probably need to start from the present as well. And so you say that in your study, and by the way, the study is available for people to download from MEF, there are downloadable, free download for everybody. But the study was showing that there is a special time. So people are moving from a generic concept of awareness to actually doing something.
There's a shift, but I don't think they're doing something because they think they need to, but they're not really doing the right things either, and that's what we can talk about in a little bit.
So we're still at the very beginning.
Yeah, we're very, very much in the beginning.
Now, if this is the consumer, so the consumer are probably noticing something, but Anurag, I'd like to ask you as well. You wear many hats, but one of the hats as Infinite Convergence I'd like to touch on is the enterprise side. And what do you think of the enterprise are experiencing, thinking, planning in terms of privacy?
No, that's a great question. And firstly, before I answer the question, I actually tend to agree with Michael. That definition that we talked about earlier is clearly dated because it does not apply in the situation we're currently facing. And I think it's important to note the situation that we currently are in, it crept up on us because there was a complete lack of awareness of the power that was in the hands of some of these companies and the power that was allowing them to pull data to the extent that we are now finding out through a lot of these breaches that are coming out in the open. So this clearly crept up on us. Now, the enterprise is no different than the consumer environment, right? Because in one side of your life, you're a consumer, and the other side, you are an enterprise employee of some sort, right? So the habits that you garner within your consumer life quickly creeps into the enterprise. And whereas in the consumer life, that privacy is something that is yours and yours alone, and you have to ultimately make that decision whether I'm comfortable with this extent of lack of privacy. The minute you walk into the enterprise, you are now working and dealing with enterprise information, which can be compromised at a much, much higher cost. And I think that is the difference between the two scenarios. But the risk is regardless the same, on both sides. Now, that being said, going back to your report, which we talked about, Michael, earlier on, I would actually challenge the report. It shows a very high level of awareness amongst the people who were surveyed. But if you look at the population today across the globe, I think, if you look, let's take India or Africa for that matter, the number of internet users and mobile users in those countries, I think India has about 1.1 billion, right? The US has about 350 million. I doubt if there's any kind of awareness in that base of users or an appreciation of protecting their privacy and managing their data. And today, I think for Facebook and WhatsApp, India is the largest market, single largest market for that company. The reason they're investing, even for Google, for that matter. So even though I think the data that's presented in the report is promising, it does not, I believe, truly tell a story where I believe awareness is a serious issue because of the fact that this issue has crept up on us. And it came up to us very suddenly. There's some level of awareness, some level of regulation, especially here in Europe with GDPR, but I think a lot more needs to be done before we actually see that level of understanding, both in the consumer's environment as well as in the enterprise. And I think everybody's saying the same thing slightly differently, because what we are saying is that we can't put privacy in a box. We can't put a boundary around it. It's going to keep changing, as you said, Andrew, because 20 years ago something was about to kill the industry. And since then, a lot has changed, and it will continue to change. So ultimately, I think it would be great if you could put it in a vault on an individual basis, but to your point, today what you decide is not private, tomorrow you may decide is absolutely private, and that's the problem that we're facing for. So then I think the onus is not only on making sure that we manage our data effectively, but there is a level of responsibility with the industry who's leveraging and monitoring this data and using it. Because it's not going to be easy enough for us to say, okay, this is my vault, and you can access the vault and take the data out only with my permission, because that vault won't be big enough to maintain the data as your needs change and as your environment changes, right? So I believe today the industry, to only a very small extent, is held responsible. We talked about Google getting fined in France for $50 million. I think it's a great first step, but for them it's a cost of doing business at the end of the day. So there has to be more responsibility put on these industries and these organizations where there is potential abuse, not use, but actual abuse of users' data. And that's what we have to be careful about. Now, I'm the last one to profess regulation or over-regulation. That's why it has to be a little bit of both. GDPR is regulation, but there has to be ownership and responsibility within the organization by the industry to self-monitor to a certain extent, so there is no abuse, and that's what we should be worried about.
My name is Ian Bushell. It's really just an interest coming back to your point about you owning the data and being able to disseminate it. But in a sense, there's also a need to verify the data. For whatever reason, I may decide to apply for health insurance and neglect to tell you that I have a heart problem. So there's that bit of the equation I'm wondering your solution to.
Anurag, quickly, would you like to answer on the topic definitions and future? Or
means that the only thing I'd say about definitions, I think definitions are academic, when at the end of the day, you know, we are seeing blatant abuse of what's going on in the industry, right? So my push really is that there should be a level of responsibility within these organizations, and they have to take ownership. They have to take ownership, because if you see some of the data that's being tracked, unbeknownst to end users, there was an article, Facebook is tracking menstrual cycles, right? So it means the extent of abuse that's going on, that has to absolutely stop. Before we even, till we are able to, all of us deploy DigiMe, right? It's going to take quite some time.
But this is also about laws. I mean, in GDPR, it is illegal to process data for a purpose for which it was not exposed and intended. If I trust the attributes of the person on the other end of the line, then I can successfully close a transaction with them with a greater probability and transact with them and make money out of them in that way that I wouldn't do it. So the authentication business has money in it, lots of it right now.
Right, and I think Julian said this, and I think it said it right. Ultimately, it's about equitable value exchange, right? If someone feels good about the services they're getting in return of their data being shared, and they're happy about it, so be it. There's so many people I talk to, do you care about Facebook monitoring every aspect of what you do? A lot of people say, I don't really care. The reason they're saying that is because they believe they're getting enough value back, and it's not a concern any longer. So it's a very relative thought process, which again will change depending on the data and depending on the value provided by the vendor. So managing that is I think, important at the end of the day.
And I wish we had all day to talk about this. So the value exchange question is really important. If you think about the formula of value exchange, it's kind of a ratio of the benefits I get divided by the risks plus the social good that gets out from the exchange of the data, because our society is benefiting from the flows of data. But what most people don't consider is the externalities within that formula. What that risk of identity theft, what the implications of are the anxiety that I will incur when that data. That's why we have the Clause 82 in the GDPR, right? Because I'm now getting all this anxiety for the fact that I have these risks. And so people don't know enough to be able to put that into the formula for value exchange, and that's another thing we're going to have to fix as we're going to move forward in the market.
Well, thank you, first of all, for you four, and thanks for you as well.